They say grief comes in waves. For me, it came in fire, searing, sudden, and destructive. The Fairmont estate loomed ahead, not the sprawling beacon of elegance I remembered from childhood, but a tired monument to a family already rotting from within. The ivy that once draped the stone walls like lace was now brittle and brown. The fountains had long since run dry, their marble cracked with time and neglect. Even the great iron gates moaned as I pushed them open, like the house itself was mourning. I walked up the path alone. No chauffeur, no polished heels echoing behind me. Just me and the crunch of gravel beneath scuffed flats. Across the circle drive, Veronica and Caleb emerged from a sleek black town car, all sharp angles and designer mourning. Her veil was delicately pinned, his cufflinks glinting in the sun. Performers, both of them. My father would have hated it. He'd built this place not for show, but for substance, for long dinners, for garden walks, for jazz on the record player and whiskey by the fire. Now it felt like a movie set with the lead actor missing. And as I stood by the gravesite, watching strangers toss dirt on the coffin of the only man who ever truly loved me, I felt something inside me burn down to embers. I didn't cry. Couldn't. My throat was locked and my hands clenched stiff at my sides. The condolences blurred into one another, empty phrases from people who had only ever admired my father's name, never truly known the man. After the service, I wandered through the foyer, past the portraits, past the grand staircase. I had barely crossed the threshold when I heard her voice. "Ella, we need a moment." Silk-lined steel. I turned to see Veronica, perfectly poised in her fitted black dress, eyes dry. Caleb leaned in the doorway of the study behind her, smirking, twirling the heavy signet ring he'd stolen from our father's dresser drawer like a trophy. The study still smelled faintly of him, oak paneling, pipe tobacco, and the faintest trace of citrus aftershave. I hadn't set foot in it since college, but everything was just as I remembered. Except Caleb. He was sitting in Dad's leather chair, legs sprawled, looking far too comfortable in a place he hadn't earned. "I'll make this simple," Veronica said, sliding a manila envelope across the polished desk. "Your father made changes before his passing. The estate, the holdings, they now belong to Caleb and me." My stomach turned. "That's not possible." "He told me," he said. "He told you a lot of things," Caleb said, with the kind of grin that made me want to throw something. "But the ink says otherwise. You're out, sis." I flinched at that word. Sis. As if we'd ever been anything close to siblings. Caleb was a pet project from Veronica's first marriage, brought into our lives when I was 11, all freckles and resentment. He had my father's name, but none of his blood. I pulled the document from the envelope, scanning the legal jargon, the seals and signatures that screamed finality. But it wasn't real. Couldn't be. My father wasn't careless. He was meticulous. He had promised me the estate would pass to me, his daughter. His real daughter. "He wouldn't do this," I said quietly. "He was clear about his wishes." "Well," Veronica said with a shrug, her voice laced with syrup, "wishes don't hold up in court. Documents do." The room tilted. My mouth went dry. I could see it now, their scheme. Caleb feeding him pills, Veronica whispering suggestions in his ear. Delaying, confusing, rewriting. Until they'd scrubbed me out completely. "You can fight it," Caleb offered, mockingly generous. "Hire some lawyer, make a scene. But we both know how that ends. Headlines, lawyers' fees, and you still end up with nothing." I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. So I nodded once. Slowly, turned on my heel, and walked out the door they'd just locked behind me. They thought they had won. They had no idea who they'd just lit a fire under. "You could contest it, of course," Veronica said, her voice soaked in mock concern. "But you'll lose. And it'll get ugly. Isn't it better to walk away with dignity, Ella?" I stared at her, her pearl earrings, her expertly sculpted expression, the cold calculation just behind her eyes. She didn't fear me. She didn't even think of me as a threat. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I simply nodded, turned, and walked out of the study, and out of the only home I'd ever known. 2 days later, I packed what little I could carry into a scratched-up suitcase. My accounts had been frozen without warning. The trust my father created for me had supposedly been revoked, dissolved under suspicious circumstances. Veronica's legal team had been faster, sharper, and more brutal than I imagined. I was shut out in every direction. In the eyes of the public, I was disgraced. Headlines painted me as the bitter daughter who'd made up stories for sympathy. I was accused of chasing money, of resenting my successful stepbrother and grieving stepmother. The court of public opinion had no time for nuance. I was nothing more than a jealous stain on an otherwise glamorous family portrait. Let them believe that. Because while they toasted my disappearance, I was planning my return. I boarded a late-night bus to Chicago under the name Ellie Barnes. No one knew I was coming, and there was no one left to tell. I arrived with $56 in my wallet and a vengeance quietly humming in my chest like a second heartbeat. For the first month, I lived in a tiny room behind a 24-hour diner on the South Side. Rosa, the owner, didn't ask questions. She handed me a key, a uniform, and a mop. I worked the morning shift on the register and wiped tables after midnight. It wasn't glamorous, but no one asked who I used to be, and that was exactly what I needed. Ella Fairborn was dead. Ellie Barnes was born from the ashes. I spent my nights hunched over borrowed library books and open laptops, devouring everything I could on finance, corporate law, shell companies, and hostile takeovers. I took free online courses, watching lectures on cracked screens while my coworkers snored across thin motel walls. I became obsessed, not with revenge, but with understanding power. The kind of power they had stolen from me. I would never be blindsided again. For years later, I walked across a community college stage and shook hands with a dean who mispronounced my name. It didn't matter. I wasn't done. 2 years after that, I had my MBA earned through blood, sleep deprivation, and carefully invested profits from flipped penny stocks and side hustles. I had a portfolio most financial advisors twice my age would envy, and no one even knew my real name. While they vacationed in Monaco and gave interviews about resilience after loss, I kept my head down. I took on clients, managed assets, and built a ghost business from the ground up. My company had no face, no origin story, no press releases. Just initials and results. The only time my hands ever trembled was when the name Fairborn Holdings surfaced in a headline, always paired with words like underperforming, liquidating, or massive losses. Caleb had gutted our father's empire with the precision of a wrecking ball. Veronica, clinging to socialite circles, tried and failed to rebrand herself as a philanthropic consultant. Their wealth was shrinking. Their credibility was shot. Creditors circled like vultures. It was poetic, but not enough. I didn't want to watch them collapse. I wanted to pull the thread. Under the alias E.B. Ashcroft, I registered a holding company in Delaware, then created a web of shell corporations that crisscrossed through real estate, logistics, hospitality, and private equity. It wasn't about making money, it was about acquiring leverage. The first asset I bought was a small shipping company Caleb offloaded in desperation. Then a vineyard Veronica had sunk millions into turning into a luxury resort, abandoned halfway through construction. I acquired each one quietly, my name never on a single deed. Every time their backs were against the wall, I made sure it was my hand tightening the rope. And still, they didn't see me coming. I bought with patience, with precision. Never too fast, never directly. I moved like smoke, visible only when I wanted to be. I let them think they were slipping due to bad luck, poor timing, economic downturns. Their last operating venture, a boutique furniture brand called Elire & Company, was barely limping along. Veronica had poured herself into it like it was a second act, but Caleb treated it like a tax write-off. I didn't need to go after the company itself. I went after its spine. I acquired the supplier that handled their imported hardwoods, using a shell company in Toronto. When I quietly pulled the contract, Citing logistics challenges and payment inconsistencies, their production halted within days. Shipments stalled, clients backed out, and their reputation took the final hit. Within 3 weeks, the brand was dead in the water. Veronica blamed the market. Caleb blamed Veronica. I didn't care who they blamed. That was between them. Because I wasn't done. Not until I had the Hollow. Fairmont Hollow had been my father's crown jewel, 50 acres of old trees, winding gardens, and a house built like it was meant to outlive us all. He'd once called it our anchor, a place where no matter what happened in the world, we could always return. But after he died, it became their ATM. They mortgaged it 3 times over, once for the furniture line, once for Caleb's failed tech startup, and once just to stay afloat. When the banks came knocking, they played desperate. But there's only so much desperation a balance sheet can hide. I waited. I watched. And then the notice came. The estate will be auctioned to satisfy outstanding debts. I sat behind a tinted window in a glass-walled office on the 15th floor of a downtown firm I technically didn't own, but controlled entirely. I watched the auction unfold on a monitor, sipping my coffee as one bidder dropped out after another. When the gavel came down, I didn't flinch. The Hollow was mine again. But I didn't drive out there that day. Or the next. I let the silence stretch. I let them wonder. I wanted every clock tick and every creaking floorboard to echo with dread. On the 31st day, the official eviction notice arrived. I made sure it was delivered precisely at 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. I wanted them to start their day with the final reminder that the empire they built on lies had finally collapsed. 30 days to pack their curated lives into boxes. 30 days to realize no one was coming to save them. 30 days to wonder which faceless buyer had taken their legacy. And then I returned. Not in a chauffeur-driven car, not flanked by lawyers or press. Just me, in a quiet black sedan, rolling over gravel that hadn't been touched since the day I left. The gate creaked open without protest. I had my own security now, men who nodded at me with the kind of silent respect that came not from money, but from earned power. I parked beneath the oak tree my father planted the year I was born. It looked tired, but still standing. Veronica stood at the top of the steps like she had every right to greet me. Her hands were folded tightly, knuckles pale. Her dark hair was too stiff, dyed too harshly. The grief in her eyes wasn't about the home, it was about losing the illusion. She didn't recognize me. "Are you with the buyers?" she asked, her voice clipped. "The mover's already finished. If you're here to inspect the grounds, just don't go into the east wing. The pipes are leaking again." I smiled. Slowly. "I'm not here to inspect anything." Her eyes narrowed, confused. "I'm here to reclaim what was mine." She blinked, and for a moment, I thought she might laugh. But then her face drained. Her mouth fell open, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "Ella." It hit her like a ghost dragging chains through the hallway. I stepped onto the porch, my boots silent on the stone. Funny, isn't it? How quickly things come full circle. Her lip quivered. You did this?" "No. You did this," I said, brushing past her into the foyer. "I just made sure you felt it." The house smelled like mothballs and desperation. But I was home. And this time, I wasn't leaving. Veronica stumbled backward, hand braced against the banister like it could steady her unraveling world. Her lips parted to speak again, but no words came out. There was nothing left for her to say that I hadn't already heard: lies, manipulation, twisted nostalgia packaged as family love. I walked deeper into the house. The hardwood floors creaked beneath my steps like they remembered me, like the house itself had been waiting for my return. Dust floated in shafts of sunlight filtering through bare windows. The chandeliers were gone. The paintings auctioned off. Even the thick Persian rug from the sitting room had vanished. All that was left were ghosts and faded outlines where furniture used to sit. "You forged the will?" I repeated, stopping in the doorway of my father's study. "You drugged him up to sign your version of the truth. And when he was gone, you rewrote history." Veronica said nothing. She didn't deny it. She didn't plead. She just stood there, arms stiff at her sides, mouth drawn tight like she might vomit the truth if she opened it. Caleb lingered in the hallway behind her, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched. He looked older, more worn than I remembered. A man who had once coasted through life on charm and stolen credit, now facing the collapse of the empire he never built. "I don't know how you did this," he said, voice hard. "But you don't deserve any of it." I turned, meeting his eyes. "And you did." His silence was the only honest thing he'd ever offered me. "You ran this house into the ground," I said, voice steady. "You took something sacred and turned it into a revolving door of leverage. You mortgaged it like it was just another bank account, not the home our father built. The legacy he wanted to protect. You didn't just steal from me, you desecrated him." His face twisted. "You think he'd be proud of this? Of you?" I stepped forward, so close I could see the red creeping up his neck. "I think he'd be proud that I fought back. That I didn't let you erase me." Veronica finally found her voice. "You think this house will make you whole again?" Her voice cracked at the edges, the mask finally slipping. "You're still the same broken girl we left behind." I tilted my head. "And you're still the same woman who never understood me. You mistook quiet for weak. You mistook patience for passivity. And now you're standing in the wreckage of your own delusion." Her hands trembled. "I built a company without your name," I continued. "I built power from nothing. I took every mistake you made and turned it into a weapon. And I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I finally understood the difference between surviving and reclaiming." I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I walked past them both, through the hallway and out the back doors that led to the garden. The stone path was cracked, weeds pushing up through the spaces. But the oak tree at the center, the one my father planted the year I was born, still stood tall. I sat beneath it, the wind carrying the scent of dust and dying roses. For the first time in years, I wasn't running. I wasn't plotting. I wasn't hiding. I was home. Behind me, the front door slammed shut. Tires screeched. Caleb, I guessed. Veronica would take longer to leave. Pride would anchor her a little while longer before it, too, snapped and sank. Eventually, I went back inside. I wandered the house, noting every empty corner, every cracked frame, every place they'd stripped bare. But I didn't see loss. I saw a blank slate. Over the next few weeks, I hired contractors, architects, designers, women like me, most of them overlooked and underestimated. Together, we began to transform the Hollow into something new. Not a museum to the past, but a haven for the future. A place for young women who had been cast aside by families, by society, by systems that rewarded charm over character. I didn't need my name carved on plaques. I didn't need headlines or credit. All I needed was peace. And I'd earned it, brick by brick. I didn't throw a party. I didn't issue a statement. I didn't even smile when the judge read the final ruling. But inside, beneath the calm exterior I'd spent years crafting, I felt something shift. Not triumph. Not vengeance. Freedom. The verdict came swiftly once the evidence was presented. My father's signature, timestamped security footage from the cellar vault, his journal entries detailing his fears about Veronica's influence on Caleb, one of which ended with a heartbreaking line, "If anything happens to me, Ella must find this place." He had known. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the full scope of their betrayal. But enough to know I would need something stronger than memories and promises. The ruling restored my legal ownership of the estate, the business assets they hadn't yet destroyed, and a portion of the liquidated holdings they hadn't been able to hide. It also invalidated their forged documents and opened a criminal investigation into Caleb's manipulation of trust funds. Publicly, they were finished. Social media turned on them overnight. Articles dissected the trial like it was a morality play. Old allies distanced themselves. Sponsors dropped Veronica's name from charity boards. And as for Caleb, he disappeared entirely. Some whispered about rehab, others about debt collectors finally catching up. Let them vanish. I had no interest in chasing ghosts anymore. Instead, I poured myself into rebuilding, not just the house, but the heart of it. The Hollow had always been more than property. It had been a sanctuary. And now it could be again, not just for me, but for others who needed the same thing I once did, a second chance. I founded the Hollow Initiative 6 months after the trial concluded. It started as a mentorship and housing program for young women leaving foster care, domestic abuse situations, or financial hardship. We provided not just shelter, but community, job training, therapy, education funding. We converted the West Wing into private living quarters, the library into a co-working space, and my father's once-forgotten study into a legal aid office. Every room gained a new purpose. Every corner came back to life. I walked those halls differently now. Not with bitterness, not with longing, but with intention. With pride. The ghosts still whispered sometimes, but they no longer haunted me. They taught me. People called me a visionary in interviews. Some dubbed me a phoenix story, others a cautionary tale about family, power, and greed. I smiled through the headlines, knowing the truth wasn't so easily packaged. I hadn't risen from the ashes. I had built the fire myself. One late spring evening, I found myself sitting beneath the oak tree again, the one my father planted the day I was born. Its branches stretched wide over the garden, casting long shadows that danced with the wind. The roses had returned, slowly, with care and water and time. Like me. Across the lawn, a group of girls laughed on the steps of the main house. One of them, Delia, a brilliant 19-year-old with sharp eyes and a quiet intensity, had just earned a full scholarship to study environmental law. I saw so much of myself in her. The way she held her pain close. The way she fought to hide her hope. She caught me watching, then smiled, hesitant at first, then full and unguarded. I nodded back, my throat tight. Later that night, I opened the old journals again, not to search for evidence, but to remember. My father's writing was steadier in the early pages, philosophical even. But in the final weeks, there were more scribbles than thoughts. More fear than guidance. Still, one sentence stood out, underlined twice in red ink. They may take everything from you, but if you survive it with your soul intact, they've already lost. I closed the journal. For the first time in a long time, I believed I had won. Not because I had the house, or the money, or the headlines, but because I hadn't let them make me bitter. I had taken what was broken and built something better. And I was just getting started. I didn't laugh when I won. I didn't gloat or throw a glass of champagne in celebration. I didn't need to. I returned to the Hollow just after sunrise, the gravel crunching beneath my tires as if to whisper, "Welcome home." I stepped out into the soft morning light, the mist still clinging to the gardens, dew soaking the stone steps. For a moment, I stood perfectly still, just breathing. The air smelled of wet earth and honeysuckle, of quiet beginnings. I let out a long breath, the one I'd been holding since the moment Veronica told me I was out. Then I went to work. Fairmont Hollow was never meant to be a tomb for memory or a trophy of revenge. It was meant to mean something. So I didn't rebuild it as it was. I reimagined it. I kept the East Wing and the Great Hall, restoring the original woodwork, cleaning every dusty arch and marble floor until it gleamed like it once had when I was a child. But I let go of the old ballroom, the gallery, the wine cellar. Instead, we built classrooms, dorms, gardens where girls could plant something of their own. We called it the Hollow Project. No surnames, no legacies to inherit, just potential to build. We took in young women who had nowhere else to go, those aged out of the foster system, survivors of abuse, girls failed by systems too slow to catch them. We gave them more than shelter. We gave them tools, education, legal help, business mentorship, emotional support, boundaries they never knew they were allowed to have. I didn't put my name on the signs. I didn't give interviews about my past. The girls didn't need to know who I used to be. Only that someone believed in who they could become. That was enough. In the evenings, I walked through the gardens with a mug of tea and bare feet, letting the wind thread through my hair. Lavender and lemon balm grew along the path. The bench under the oak tree became my favorite place to sit, where the light hit just right and the past softened like old paper. Sometimes I thought about my father and how he'd hold my hand as we walked this path when I was small. How he'd stop suddenly and say, "Always keep something growing, else something that's yours, that needs you." I didn't understand it then. I do now. As for Caleb, he vanished to some city in the southwest, last I heard. Rumors said he tried to open a consulting firm. It failed within a year. Debt caught up to him, along with the truth. Veronica tried to spin a new narrative, a misunderstood widow, a woman deceived by her own son, a victim of bad paperwork. But even her polished charm couldn't fix her public fall. Foundations stopped returning her calls. Donors dried up. The media wasn't interested in revision. They wanted resolution. And me? I became an answer to a question no one saw coming. I didn't give the public a redemption story. I gave them a blueprint, how to build, how to rise, how to turn pain into purpose without turning bitter. When people ask if I regret it, losing everything, disappearing, dismantling what was once my family, I always tell the truth. No. I don't regret the war I had to wage or the silence I had to endure. Because revenge was never the goal. It was the path. The real win wasn't proving them wrong, it was reclaiming myself. It was stepping back into the world not with vengeance, but with vision. A future I shaped with my own hands. A life no one could take from me again. And as I watched a new group of girls unpack their things in the West Wing, laughing and arguing about posters and playlists, I saw it clearly. Legacy isn't about inheritance or bloodlines. It's about what you build into others. And this was only the beginning. I've told you my story, not for pity, and not for applause, but because I know I'm not the only one who's ever been underestimated, betrayed, or cast aside. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe someone tried to write you out of your own life, the way they tried to write me out of mine. If you saw even a piece of yourself in my journey, I want to hear from you. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you fought for, what you rebuilt, who you became when no one believed in you. I'm not the same woman who left Fairmont Hollow all those years ago with a suitcase and a heart full of fire. I'm stronger, wiser, softer in some ways, sharper in others. And I've learned that revenge might start the journey, but it's purpose that keeps you going. If you took anything from my story, let it be this. You don't need anyone's permission to rise. You don't need approval to reclaim what was stolen. And you don't have to stay broken just because someone wanted you to be. Support women like me, women who rebuild in silence, who rise with grace, who take their scars and turn them into blueprints. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of their power. And above all, remember this. Legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you build into others while you're still here. Thanks for walking this road with me. I see you. I believe in you. Now go build something they never saw coming.